Hello, everybody. Welcome to the power rankings for Season 1 of the VGC Draft League on the from the WPF, World Pokemon Federation. I'm Avent, and I will be doing these power rankings today. I've set up this doc here to keep everything in order. We'll have the Mons here, ranking. I will have bolded some notable support options for each team, average stat rankings, and weaknesses and resistances, and I'll be rating them on the teams on their synergy, flexibility, utility, each out of 10, and then typing, offense, defense, maxing potential, and matchups out of 5. These are the 3 at the top are a little more important, so we'll have them higher weight, and then the total will be out of 55. So first step, we have the Dutch Dreadnoughts, coached by Vatcord, who has our lowest ranking for today. So when I first look at this team, I see there's some good synergy between Charizard and Torkoal for being in the sun. Also, Heliolisk is a possible sun option, and Maractus. But in general, Heliolisk isn't that great of a mon, and it's basically just the same thing it's basically just another Jolteon. These are pretty much the same mon. And Maractus just isn't amazing. I mean, you can double its speed, but with speed of 80, some things will still outspeed it in the sun. And its attacking stats are nothing crazy. It does have some high offense, I've noted, with the second highest average in the league, and some sun boosted fire attacks coming from these two, as well as Jolteon and Heliolisk again having pretty high special attack. And Lucario can kind of hit hard, but it doesn't really synergize with anything on the team. There's no beat up strategies for it, which is usually what Lucario is used with in doubles with its justified ability. So there's no real synergy for Lucario here. The synergy, I gave it a 6 out of 10. Flexibility, also 6. It's like, what are you going to be doing? You're going to have your sun set up with these, but then nothing else really synergizes amazing. Normally, max options would include like Lucario and Rhyperior, but there's not a whole lot to proc Rhyperior weakness policy unless you want to like surf Azumarill maybe. That's an option, so Rhyperior could be a potential Dynamax, but the real Dynamax winner here is Charizard, especially in the sun. With its solar power boost, it's probably the best Dynamax option for the most part. Again, Lucario could be, but since there's no beat-up options, that really hinders its maxing potential. It has some really high offense overall, again with Charizard, Jolteon, Lucario, Azumarill, Torkoal. It's just some like hefty power, Rhyperior all around. Defensively, it's not amazing, as there is quite a lot of rock weakness going on here, as well as ground from these guys. So quite a bit of ground and rock weakness, and not a whole lot of resists. And the utility here too is kind of low as a 4. Like you have some Thunder Wave options, Helping Hand, and Yawn from Jolteon and Heliolisk. It seems Jolteon may be playing a more supportive role here. You do have Thunder Wave Reflect Light Screen coming from Grimmsnarl, which could be pretty useful. It does have Prankster as well. But I could see Jolteon being potentially used for a support option here and there, but mainly Grimmsnarl as well. And its matchups aren't too great. It does kind of lose to other weathers, and there's no Tailwind support, so without the sun, your speed isn't amazing. Like you have Jolteon, but that's really the only. These guys are kind of fast, but not amazing. So no Tailwind and no options for Trick Room either. There's also no redirection, which is another big hit for the utility, and there's no terrain control. So and its terrain matchups aren't amazing either. So overall, the matchups are kind of low. You're really going to have to be relying on your sun strat here and really keeping that up and trying to sweep with Zard. But if you run into some hard ground rock hard hitters, you might be running into some problems. Next, we have the New Zealand Pichus, coached by Aku in rank 17. So this looks like a Trick Room team with the lowest speed average in the league, which could essentially be the highest if you're in Trick Room, because you're using your lower speed will go first. But the only Trick Room setter is Dusknoir, which is kind of just a worse Dusclops, if we're being honest. So kind of the synergy overall is not bad. Kind of just going hard on the Trick Room. You have Hydreigon and Venusaur, although the Venusaur doesn't have Sun, but these could be used outside of Trick Room. Otherwise, Trick Room on, Trick Room on, Trick Room, Trick Room, Trick Room. Just hard Trick Room over here. Again, that does rely on the Dusknoir getting that up. Discount Dusclops. Again, some heavy hitters. Conkeldurr, Escavalier, Golisopod Rhyperior, these really high attack stats. Can hit hard, but again, really needs to be in Trick Room. So that's our synergy. Flexibility is really not flexible at all. If you're not running Trick Room, your only option is kind of Hydreigon, and that's quad weak to Fairy, weak to Fighting, weak to some common offensive types. And then you could potentially use Venusaur outside of Trick Room, but you don't have any Sun support for it. So it's not going to be that fast. Not going to be outspeeding like really fast teams or really fast mons. So outside of Trick Room, there's really no options. Maybe Tailwind with Butterfree. But even then, these mons are so slow, even with Tailwind. That's not doing too much for them. So really, Trick Room is the main mode here. Otherwise, it's not super flexible with that. The utility is mediocre. You have Trick Room with Dusknoir. You have something like Tailwind, Sleep Powder on Butterfree. And then you have like Follow Me and Helping Hand on Clefairy. The utility isn't amazing. You have a little bit with these three here. You have some redirection with Clefairy, which is pretty important. Potential Tailwind with Butterfree as mentioned, but it's not amazing, especially with the extremely slow team. And then Dusknoir kind of just, like Will-O-Wisp, Trick Room, like maybe Pain Split, kind of just Dusclops, same moves Dusclops gets. But the utility is not great. There's no weather control, which would be really nice with the Venusaur, as mentioned. And there's no terrain control at all. And it seems like an abusable matchup, especially turn 1. If you're trying to get Trick Room up, they could just double into the Dusknoir and take it out in one turn. And it's not usually something you would sash because it's so bulky, but if it gets doubled into, it could easily go down in turn 1. And then you lose your Trick Room, and then the whole team kind of falls apart at that point. It's also super weak to Intimidate. Physical, physical, physical. All these mons are physical that you really want to be hitting hard with. And if you get intimidated, you have nothing to... You have no Defiant, no Competitive, no Mirror Armor or anything. So it's just... There's not very many options against Intimidate here. Which again hurts the flexibility a little bit. And the matchups. Kind of gets hurt there. Maxing options, defense and offense. You have some decent stats. You have the highest overall attack and defense. So again, you hit really hard with these physical attackers. But that kind of just makes it more weak to Intimidate with the lowest special attack in the league. So these can be good, but again, very, very one-dimensional with the Trick Room. And max candidates, we have Conkeldurr, Rhyperior, Venusaur, Escavalier. These three, again, will probably have to be under Trick Room. And what are you going to be proccing Weakness Policy on for Rhyperior here? Like Aqua Jet Golisopod, but then there's no Trick Room with this combo here. So a little bit rough, not too flexible. You're really going to have to try to make the most out of these high stats you got here. Next up, we have the Real Mareep, coached by Andre, ranked 16th. So when you look at the team here too, we see a lot of support options. We've got Butterfree with Tailwind, Noivern with Tailwind, some Will-O-Wisp, Thunderwave, Room Ally Switch shenanigans on Rotom, and Intimidate from Hitmontop. We also have a little bit of terrain control with Rillaboom, and some more other wacky support options with like Lightning Rod here, and then maybe like Will-O-Wisp, Trick Room on Mimikyu. So the utility is pretty good, but it's still lacking any weather, still lacking redirection, lacking some of those core. It does have Tailwind, but it's still lacking some of those really important support options here. You do have Tailwind still. You have a Trick Room setter with Mimikyu, but it's not the best Trick Room setter, but it's definitely not the worst. You don't really have any options to use under Trick Room. Like your slowest speed, your speed overall is 3rd, so Trick Room doesn't help you out too much. So that's why another reason for the utility here. You do have a good core here with these three. The classic Fire, Water, Grass are pretty strong mons overall and add to the synergy a little bit. And you do have the Tailwind as mentioned, which are really good for some of these guys here, like Mamoswine, Rillaboom, Urshifu, and Rotom. So the Tailwind can really help out these guys. And the Intimidate will help with your low-ish defensive stat. Overall, the team is kind of low synergy. It's like, as I mentioned, you can kind of Tailwind these guys. That's about it. You have these three, the core here. The synergy's not too high on this one. It's kind of flexible though, like depending on what you're gonna pick for your Tailwind options. You have a couple options here, and then Primarina is just kind of a menace all around. Can kind of fit into anything. Typing is pretty solid all around. No like huge weaknesses. There's a few flying weaknesses, but you can deal with that with like Rotom's electric, Primarina's potentially ice. You have electric here, which isn't great, but then you have ice on Mamoswine as well. It is kind of weak to redirection. Like you don't have anything to counter redirection. I mean, this guy can hit through protect, but that's a lot of redirection. So there's no redirection, no real way to deal with that. So I keep some matchups kind of at 3. No weather, and you don't have any redirection yourself either. So the matchups aren't amazing. They're not horrible, because again, Tailwind is kind of strong. Maybe reverse the Trick Room with Mimikyu, that might be your plan. Which could be an option. So the matchups are kind of okay. Overall, we gave it a 35 out of 55. Next up, we have the Washington National Dexters, coached by Jake and Piora. Hope I said that right. And ranked 15th. So this looks like a classic hyper offense team. You have some really fast heavy hitters with Gengar, Cinderace, Excadrill, Gyarados, Obstagoon, and Komao. And then you also have some speed in a Selgor, which is kind of the oddball. Like it doesn't really fit in here too well. But you do have some very, very strong physical attackers here. Average attack is only 8th place, but these are still heavy hitters, especially with Guts on Obstagoon will raise that attack even higher. You do have the first highest overall speed, and it kind of looks like your plan is to just Tailwind and then let these physical attackers go to town, which can still work, especially against other Tailwind. You'll have the advantage there because you guys are so fast. But yeah, this seems kind of one-dimensional. So the synergy is kind of just Tailwind these strong guys. That's really the only main synergy that stands out too much. You do have like Dragon, Steel Fairy kind of. Flexibility, not too flexible. Again, you're really just trying to Tailwind these guys, get them going. The flexibility comes from having different options. Like you're not going to bring 6 offensive options each week. But that's kind of where the only flexibility is being able to switch these out. Utility is mediocre. I mean, you have redirection on Clefairy here, and you have a little bit of Psy Spam, although it's just the Indeedee by himself. So you have a little bit of terrain control, a little bit of redirection. You have Tailwind, priority Tailwind on Talonflame here is pretty nice. I guess you could use a Selgor for like Power Swap and Guard Split and things like that. But it seems kind of like a subpar option if you're going to be running a subpar option for any form of utility. Typing, pretty average. Nothing crazy stands out. Offense, again, 5 out of 5 on this. Like, you just hit so hard with some of these guys, especially under Tailwind. Your offensive prowess is pretty high there. Well, the typing is okay. The defenses are low. You have the lowest overall defense, the 3rd lowest. Overall special defense, and below average HP. So a lot of these guys are quite frail. Like Gengar, Cinderace. Although Cinderace's Libero does help a lot with some type advantages, but it is still pretty squishy. And then things like Komao, Obstagoon, and Gyarados all have a quad weakness, which they can be taken advantage of pretty easily. So not bad overall, really just quite reliant on the Tailwind and then sweeping with your hyper offense here. Next up, we have the KTM Belades, coached by Vaxo, and I have it at 14th. So again, just going off the top, synergy here, not too amazing. You look down, this guy has some crazy utility, in my opinion. You have Tailwind with Drifblim here. You have Politoed, which is just a support menace. Helping Hand, Icy Wind, Perish Song. It's just so supportive. You have Male Meowstick, which kind of adds more options here. Along with Hitmontop, there's some Fake Out options. Trick Room, he's not a great Trick Room user, but the option is there. And then you have Togetic and Amoonguss, which gives you Spore, Rage Powder, and Follow Me. So the utility is just nutty on this team. You also have Togedemaru for Lightning Rod, which you don't have really anything to take advantage of it aside from like these three, but these are your supports. You're not usually supporting your supports. So yeah, the utility is just crazy on this, but the offense is kind of lacking. We only have it at 2 here. Your only offensive options are Copperajah, Kingdra, and Tyranitar. You do have the synergy that's kind of carrying this to where it is Kingdra Politoed to get the rain up. But if you're bringing Kingdra Politoed, you don't want to bring Tyranitar because you're going to be resetting your own weather. And you don't want to be bringing Copperajah because you're going to want to Trick Room this. It's so slow. It's not going to synergize well with these two wanting to be fast. You don't really want to be bringing Tyranitar and Copperajah at the same time because again, the Copperajah needs Trick Room. Tyranitar's kind of slow, but not that slow. And you also have nothing to benefit from the sand that Tyranitar is giving. So it just really looks like you're going to need to only possibly just bring one offensive mon per week and then try to support it as best you can with all these different options. The Tailwind could be used on a Tyranitar, but again, that and Kingdra are kind of the only things that would benefit from it. And Kingdra, if you're supporting with Tailwind rather than the Rain, its damage goes down a bit because it won't have its boosted water moves. So the offense isn't amazing. You just kind of have 3 options that don't fit together. You do have weather control kinda. Again, nothing benefits from the sand aside from Tyranitar itself. Maxing candidates again are these 3 that are all separate and aren't really cohesive together. You have some high HP for defense for your defensive candidates, but there's kind of really low defense here, only 16th, and special defense is only slightly above average. So defense isn't amazing, it's not horrible. Yeah, just the main thing is a poor offensive synergy. So you're really just gonna have to make some work with these supportive mods. Next up, we have the Overdrive Pignites, coached by Hyder in rank 13th. So when you're looking here, it kind of just looks like you have 2 Tailwind options with Noivern and Braviary, which are both decent. Noivern's pretty fast, and Braviary can take a hit if needed. Not a super effective hit, but it can take something. And then it kind of looks like you just want to sweep with Venusaur, Blastoise, Durant, Mamoswine, Chandelure, and Scrafty kind of able to take advantage of that Tailwind. It just kind of looks like this team is Tailwind and then sweep with these strong Mons. So that's kind of the only synergy is the Tailwind in those. You have Hatterene, but you don't have any other Trick Room setter. Like, it can set for itself, but that's not optimal, especially with a severe lack of redirection here. So it doesn't really want to set for itself because it'll just get doubled into potentially. Chandelure could set, but again, not an amazing synergy here with the Trick Room. Not super flexible. Again, the flexibility is really just which offensive mons you bring out of these guys. Braviary kind of too. That's the main flexibility here, is just switching these up. Utility isn't amazing. Like, you have like Thunder Wave, Tailwind. You have Yawn from Blastoise. So it feels like Scrafty and Blastoise and Noivern might be like the supportive mons. Blastoise can kind of go either way. It has a lot of options. I think Blastoise gets Fake Out as well. Yeah, Blastoise does get Fake Out as well. I just checked. So this might be a better utility option, but then you're kind of losing a little bit of your maxing potential by using it as a supporter. Speaking of maxing, you do have some good options there with like Max Airstream from Braviary, Venusaur, Blastoise are decent max options, and then of course Hustle Durant will be putting out the work for this team, which we did give a 5 just because of how strong the Tailwind and these physical and special options are, especially with the Hustle Durant. Unfortunately, there's again, kind of hurting on the synergy, there's no Sun for Venusaur. Both Venusaurs we've seen so far haven't had any Sun support, which is such a strong combo that we aren't going to see very much of, if at all. Yeah, that's about it for this team. Again, just Tailwind and some raw power here is what it's looking like. Next up, we have the MSN, who doesn't have a logo, but is coached by Blackatrout, and we have in rank 12. So the synergy is kind of average overall. You kind of have like not a whole lot going on for synergy. You have, yeah, there's no fire, water, grass. It's just grass and water. You have some sand control, which adds to the utility a bit, but nothing to benefit from the sand. You have a potential like priority draining kiss into Gudra, but that's kind of it. Like Passimian doesn't really want to receive any of these abilities. Like it really doesn't need any of them. I don't know, maybe you could get a download physical boost from Porygon, but again, Passimian doesn't synergize too well. This is kind of the main thing, and even that isn't amazing by itself. So the synergy is on the lower end. It's somewhat flexible, like depending on what you're going to pick. You have weather and terrain control with Rillaboom, but again, there's nothing to benefit from the weather. So it's just kind of to mess with other weather teams will kind of help out. Will help you by having them not have their weather. Overall bulk is pretty solid. You got some slightly below average HP, quite high defense, and then the highest special defense. So the bulk here is quite good, the defensive side. Just kind of weak to poison with 1, 2, 3 fairy types and Rillaboom. Quite a bit of poison weakness. You do have an immunity, but it's just on Aegislash, who isn't amazing in the format at the moment, but might be a little better in draft. So just that's why the defense isn't at 5 here, just because of all the poison weakness. You have some good offensive coverage. We gave it a 3 overall. Like we've got Rillaboom, Passimian, Gudra, Aegislash. Some pretty decent offensive prowess overall. And I think with having Aegislash having his stats change, skew these a little bit. So his attack would be kind of higher than 12 if you factor in Aegislash here. And special attack would be higher. Yeah, utility, you have Mr. Mime, Grimmsnarl, Porygon, Comfy, and Melodic kinda. So it's pretty good overall. Like you have reflect light screen options with both of these two. And you can remove other people's screens if they have them with Mr. Mime. Melodic is just pretty good utility mon with things like Icy Wind, which you do have here. And then you have some like potential Trick Room with Porygon, maxing candidates, Gudra, Passimian, maybe Rillaboom, maybe Grimmsnarl. Kind of just these two are the two main maxing candidates I see here, especially since this isn't a G-Max Rillaboom. Rillaboom on itself is not a bad max, but I think these are your two maxing winners here. Matchups are kind of good overall. Like you can disrupt other terrain and disrupt other weather, which isn't horrible. Kind of weak to Psy Spam, but you do have Grimmsnarl here to help with that, to help in that department, as well as just some high special defense and resist from Aegislash in shield form, and Gigalith in the sand will have a pretty high special defense stat as well. I would say maybe with Assault Vest, but Assault Vest might be better suited here on Rillaboom. So kind of weak to poison, we already mentioned. Kind of weak to steel as well. These guys are weak to steel here. Not a whole lot to deal with the steel. Maybe Passimian, but that's kind of about it. And then Steel Resist Dragon here as well. So steel and poison are two big hits to this team for the typing here. Not super fast. Overall speed is 12th. There is no tailwind support. There's no redirection. And like it's kind of slow, but it's not really slow enough for Trick Room, which you have. It seems like Porygon's kind of suited for Trick Room, but your lowest speed is 25, which would be usable, and then your next lowest is 60, which is kind of too fast for Trick Room for the most part. Might help you against really fast teams because you'll be slower than them, but Trick Room isn't super reliable here. It might have some problems with Cinderace. Like Cinderace kind of just goes to town on this, changing its typing all the time. With Libero, we all know how frustrating that can be to deal with, and especially with no redirection, it might cause some problems for you here, especially it getting to access to both poison and steel moves. Second highest overall stat total, so just kind of some good stat power overall, especially kind of inflated with Gudra, like Melodic, Aegislash, and Gigalith here. So yeah, just a little bit of trouble with Trick Room maybe, and Cinderace, but his matchups are overall not bad. Next up we have Milwaukee Miltanks, coached by Ballhawk in rank 11. which I call this team the mix-up team. Kind of has some crazy options going on here. We see possible beat-up strategies onto Arcanine coming from Dragapult. We can also see weakness policy G-Max Colossal happening with either like something from some water move or something from a Selgor or a Azumarill. And then we also see a very powerful Water Shuriken into Palossand, which could be quite scary here. Getting a max defense Palossand with weakness policy maxed is not something most people are going to want to deal with. It is a little weak to redirection because, again, if you're relying on that beat up and that Water Shuriken, or sorry, beat up onto Arcanine, and then hitting your Colossal and Water Shuriken the Palossand, redirection just kind of negates all of that, so that's a little rough. It's also not great speed control. No Tailwind. You have Trick Room on these two Mons, but these aren't amazing Trick Room Mons because they're so fast. So they're not going to benefit from it at all. And they're giving up their turn that normally they'd be going first to set it up. And then your options in Trick Room are like Colossal and Palossand. And like Shadodic, I guess. So Trick Room isn't amazing here. Lacks a little bit of speed control. Poor Sand matchup. Poor Sandstorm matchup. Not a whole lot to deal with it. Like, you have no grass. You have Azumarill could potentially help you out with that. But like, this is weak to sand. This is weak to sand. These fairies will be weak if they have Excadrill, who can like Iron Head you. And overall, most of your mons aren't fast enough to, except for Dragapult really, to be doing anything in sand if something is getting their speed boost from it. The utility is good. So the flexibility was good because these options you have, like the Colossal, Dragapult just in general is super flexible. And then your Palossand and Arcanine potentials here. Utility is pretty decent overall. You have Shiinotic for some Spore shenanigans. Kind of just worse Amoonguss, but worse Amoonguss is better than no Amoonguss. This guy gives you some kind of wacky shenanigans going on here with like, I think I mentioned it in another team. He has like guard split and power split, or power swap, guard swap. So you can potentially use like guard swap on an enemy to really lower their defenses. That's kind of just some wacky stuff. Utility is not bad though. And you do have intimidate on Arcanine, although you can't have that and Justify at the same time. Typing, pretty average. A little weak to rock with this guy, and this guy. Offense, pretty high. Bam, 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 bam. Like, that's quite a bit of offense going for you there. Defense isn't amazing. It's kind of squishy, like 15th defense, 17th special defense. HP is slightly above average, but just kind of squishy. Like, these guys are taken out pretty easily, especially if they're built offensively. And then this has 2 4x weaknesses. Maxing candidates, you have quite a few, as mentioned. Colossal, Dragapult, Palossand, Arcanine with beat up, Azumarill potentially. Basically, your offensive options are your maxing options. And there's quite a few of them, and they're pretty solid. So matching is good. Matchups is a little bit harder, again, without any real Trick Room option, and absolutely no weather and no terrain control. You might struggle against some faster teams, and no Tailwind either. So that kind of really hurts in your speed department. And if your fastest is Dragapult, but that still gets outsped in against Weather Sweepers, they'll still outspeed you there. And then your Colossal can get Steam Engined, but that's still not the fastest thing around. Like, it's fast, but I imagine it would still get outsped by Weather Sweepers. So that's why the matchups are a little on the low end. Overall, quite offensive. It just seems a little gimmicky, and you're going to be weak to redirection. But if you can get past those, your offense will definitely win you some games. Next up, we have the Chattanooga Mach Punches, led by Kasim, ranked 10th. This team we're starting to get into some of the stronger teams, mainly with synergy. You'll see the synergy starts going up. This looks like a sand team. You have Excadrill, Gigalith, which is quite a powerful combo. Not Tyranitar, but it's still pretty solid. I think most people have had to deal with that before, especially Max Excadrill gets defense boosts with Max Steel Spike, special defense boosts with Max Ground, and then could potentially raise its attack with Max Fighting, or even set its own sand with Max Rockfall. So sand offense is pretty strong. Decent synergy with, you have like Follow Me and Rage Powder here. You compare that with Flapple or Volcarona, which are some both other very powerful mons. Volcarona gets like a setup with Quiver Dance and then maxes is very strong. And Flapple just maxes Life Orb off the hop with Hustle. Again, very high power, especially with a 110 attack. Hustle is pretty threatening. So the redirection is good, and redirection kind of just in general helps with these guys like Inteleon, Urshifu as well, just keeping them alive so they can do their damage. It's quite the beef squad overall too. You see, give it 5 out of 5 on defense. Highest HP. While the typings aren't amazing, with some pretty clear fighting and flying weaknesses. Like fighting will be able to do some damage to these guys and Urshifu as well, and then flying hurts Urshifu and these grass types. And Volcarona, so kind of weak to flying, kind of weak to fighting. Typing's not amazing, but defense is still pretty good with the stats. Like you have Amoonguss, Clefable, Vaporeon, Aegislash, Gigalith. Those are all pretty defensive mons overall. For utility, it's pretty good. It's not perfect though. There's no terrain control, which isn't necessary, but it's just not there. You do have Helping Hand, Yawn from Clefable, Follow Me from Clefable, Yawn from Vaporeon, Spore, and Rage Powder from Amoonguss. So the utility is pretty strong here, especially with the sand. It's just not perfect, but it is quite good. There's a lack of Tailwind, not a whole lot of Trick Room options. There's a lack of max Airstreams, which is another reason why the utility isn't perfect here. Just a lack of those things. This Tailwind could help this team out quite a bit as well. And Volcarona also gets Rage Powder, so we look out for that. That could be interesting tech. It kind of has a poor matchup into terrains like Psy Spam. It doesn't really have anything to deal with Psy Spam aside from Urshifu, but if your opponent has a Fairy type with the Psy Spam, then that's kind of out the window. And then maybe like a defensive Aegislash or a high Spadef Gigalith, but it's not amazing. Other matchups are kind of average. If you get into another weather, it's just going to be Weather War. If you start off the hop, Gigalith will get his weather because he's so slow. But it's just kind of mostly be a skill dependent matchup for the other weathers. And this team is also very weak to Intimidate. Physical attacker, physical, potentially physical. And all these just get hurt really hard by Intimidate. And you don't have anything to prevent Intimidate either. So watch out for Intimidate on this one. Hurts some matchups a little too. Maxing potential is good. You have Excadrill, Urshifu, Flapple, Volcarona as mentioned earlier. Volcarona mainly after it gets a Quiver Dance, which is quite possible with the redirection options. So some good maxing potential overall. Summary just looks like you want to get your sand up or redirect for these other threats here. Next up is the Washington Rotom Wizards, coached by Potato Z, ranked 9th. So we're in the middle of the pack here. So it looks like it's a pretty good Trick Room team overall. Like it has good Trick Room function with Excadrill, Hatterene, and maybe Arctovish, but mostly those two. And then you have one of the best Trick Room setters is Dusclops. So that's a really good Trick Room option. You also have Beat Up from Dragapult or Weavile onto Terrakion here. Yeah, so the synergies are pretty good for 8 there. You can maybe do something with Sun, like a Max Flare into Cheerum. Or, not into Cheerum, but to set the Sun for Cheerum. Cheerum itself gets an attack boost in the Sun, so it's not an amazing Sun Chlorophyll user, but it is an option. It is like a synergy option. You could also potentially proc Weakness Policy easily on Dragapult with like Weavile. So the synergy's there. It's pretty flexible. You have different options. Again, you have a Volcarona. There's nothing for... You have no redirection. Well, you have redirection on Volcarona, but you don't have anything to redirect away from Volcarona. Again, lack of redirection really hurts with utility for a lot of teams, especially when you could really use it with Hatterene, Dragapult, Terrakion, Volcarona would be really, really helped by having some redirection. So the utility is okay. Again, no redirection. Like, really has like coaching, prankster coaching, which isn't amazing, but it is an option. You have some really good maxing potential. I put a 5 out of 5. Again, you got these guys are just like these 4 are just so good at maxing, especially after a beat up onto Terrakion. It's just so powerful. And then in Trick Room, Escavalier could be a good maxing option as well. Arctivish is kind of out of place. Like, it kind of works in Trick Room. It doesn't really work outside of it. And like, it doesn't have hustle like Draco's ult. So it doesn't seem like it synergizes too well with much here. No redirection, no tailwind. Again, hurting that utility score. Tailwind again could help with these guys. Dragapult's already pretty fast. This team is pretty physically weak, so the defense we had low and the typing we had low. We'll get to the typing in a set, but the defensive is low. You have the lowest overall health, 12 defense, and the special defense is high, but you just kind of get hefted by some strong physical moves. Things like Dragapult can go down in one shot easy to physical moves, Hatterene, Volcarona. Yeah, so kind of weak defensively with the ghost weaknesses here. And a few fairy weaknesses with these guys. So just a little bit on the typing and defensive holds it back a little bit, but I think the Trick Room options are still good, and then the beat up options are still very strong as well. Next up, we have the Buffalo Bouffalant in 8th place, coached by 400 meter. So this looks like overall a pretty strong Trick Room team with some slow mons like Cofagrigus, Gastrodon, Hatterene, Licky maybe. Yeah, so you got a strong Trick Room option here. You have a strong, just kind of offensive core, Firewater Grass with these 3 here. Gives you Intimidate for some utility. This team kind of looks like is built around Duraludon. Like, you can use some neutralizing gas from Weezing here to help support it. You also have some more supportive options with these 2 guys with like Thunder Wave to slow things down so Duraludon can outspeed. Fake Out on Raichu. Again, neutralizing gas here. You also have Haze option on Weezing and Ally Switch Will-O-Wisp on Cofagrigus. So the utility is pretty good with Cofagrigus, Weezing, Raichu. Synergy's alright. You do have possible weakness policy on these 2, which could be procced by Raichu onto Hawlucha. You could proc this with like a weak fighting move from Incineroar maybe, or Hawlucha. You do have some good offense overall. You've got like Rillaboom, Duraludon, Hatterene, Hawlucha. So like you have 2 good physical attackers, 2 good special attackers, good balance there. Good typing overall. You've got like a Firewater Grass core. Kind of still Dragon Fairy, although still Dragons like together. So yeah, the typing's okay. Offense is pretty high. Defense is a little better. HP is slightly below average. Defense is really high. Special defense is kind of low. But you just have some like outstandingly tanky mons, and like Incineroar, especially with a health recovery berry. Weezing, Gastrodon, Cofagrigus, Licky, like that's just some nutty defensive mons there. A lot of matchups are quite neutral, as you can kind of counter any weather or terrain based strategies with neutralizing gas on Weezing. The neutralizing gas might hurt you a little bit, but honestly you probably gain more from neutralizing other stuff than you do from losing from neutralizing your own things. And I don't really see why Licky is here. Like, its main option is Cloud9 to help negate weather, but Weezing just does that as well. And I'd say Weezing does it better. Utility is okay. It's not bad, but it's spread across like different mons. I think we already went over utility a bit. You're still lacking any redirection. Again, redirection is so huge, and so many teams are lacking it here. It's not amazing with the lack of redirection. No tailwind and no weather, but again, you can negate weather with Weezing, so we kind of even those out. Maxing candidates, kind of average. You've kind of only got Hatterene under Trick Room, and these 2 guys outside of Trick Room. And a Tailwind would really have helped Duraludon here as well, which is something you're lacking. But that would have helped Duraludon a ton. Gastrodon and Rillaboom aren't horrible. I think this is G-Max Rillaboom. Yeah, this is G-Max. I didn't have the correct sprite, the correct Sprite here, but this is G-Max Orbeetle, so that's a good maxing candidate too. And again, if you're really trying to support Duraludon or Hawlucha a lot, then Follow Me would have been really nice. So overall, good Trick Room option with these guys. Good support for Duraludon with these guys. And then you're kind of just missing any redirection, which is the main hole. And then your matchups are not bad. They're going to be very skill dependent with the Wheezing, which can negate a lot of things. Here we have the Guangzhou Gigazards in 7th place, coached by not Adam. So when you first look at the team, it kind of looks like you got your Psy Spam here for synergy and beat up Cobalion, and that's about it for the synergy. So the synergy is not crazy, despite it still being quite a good team. Those are really the only main two. You do have female NDD, so you can have some redirection for a max Flapple, which is another possible one, but again, it's not super synergistic, just kind of the Psy Spam and then possible beat up. You have Trick Room in this, but you have nothing to use it for. Like, nothing's really slow enough to use Trick Room aside from Rhydon, which if you're not going to base your entire strategy around Rhydon. Your utility is pretty great, put it at 9. So the utility is pretty nutty with Incineroar, of course, Parting Shot U-turn. Intimidate is just strong overall. Intimidate, Parting Shot, U-turn I don't have on here, but it's just Incineroar is one of the best supporting mons. Indeedee female, another amazing supporting mon with Follow Me, Trick Room, but not really going to be used. There's Trick Room on male. Yeah, they both get Trick Room. Again, nothing really to utilize Trick Room too much. But you do have things like Priority Tailwind with Fletchinder. You have maybe like Trick Room Reversal, I guess, would be better for Mimikyu, and it has like Will-O-Wisp as well. And it can stick around with its Disguise. So the utility is pretty strong here, and you do have Tailwind, which is quite powerful. There's the really thing only holding it back is no way to control weather. You do have terrain control, but there's no weather control here, which is really the only thing holding back the utility here. With the Tailwind, the Redirection, the Intimidate is quite good. For Max Mons, we gave it a 4. So you have like Cobalion, Flapple, Primarina are all good maxing. Your G-Max Orbeetle doesn't really synergize well here. Maybe with Psy Spam, like maybe. But even then, like its special attack's only 80. If you're Psy Spamming, you're just going to be using these. So you do have these 3 good Max Mons though, which are quite strong. And you have way to proc the beat up or the justified with beat up, and you have just the power of Life Orb Hustle, Flapple. Matchups again, kind of skill matchup. No options for weather. There's quite a bit of weather running around, so you'll have to deal with that. Otherwise, the terrains aren't really a huge weakness for you because you can set your own. You have Tailwind to counter other Tailwind. You have Trick Room, kind of like to stop Trick Room, you have it. Yeah, so the matchups are overall decent. Typing is pretty solid too. You've got Fire, Water, Grass. More like Fire from Incineroar is more the option. And then you have no Dragon, but you do have some good Steel Fairy types. No weaknesses here stand out crazy. Like nothing that, the only 4 weaknesses Bug. From this guy, this guy, this guy. Guy is kind of your Bug weakness, but you have 4 Bug resist, and there's not a lot of offensive Bug anyways. But yeah, your typings are good overall for sure. So Rhydon, don't know what it's doing here. Maybe like Eviolite, proc weakness policy on it. Dynamax, maybe. That's a possibility. Well, you can't have Eviolite and weakness policy. So yeah, it's kind of a mystery what the Rhydon is doing here. It lacks offense if you lose your terrain, and you are a little sore against redirection because your main offensive threats are your Psy Spam and your beat up. So if you get redirected, you have no beat up option, and if you lose your terrain, you have no Psy Spam option. So your offense is kind of hurt by the potential of losing those. And you can reverse Trick Room, but it's not a great Trick Room option. You're pretty fast overall. Against somebody who's able to get the Trick Room up, you're going to suffer a little bit there. But overall, it's alright. Just these is your main power here. A little bit of support. But yeah, not a bad team overall. Next up is our 7th place team, the Hamilton High Dragons, coached by Avent, me, and I did get some friends to rate this, so it would be more of an objective rating than what I would give it. So clear rain team, we have Kingdra Politoed, obvious rain synergy there. Synergy overall is pretty strong. We have a beat up strategy on Cobalion with Weavile. We also have Rapid Strike Urshifu to fit in with the rain here is quite strong. Togekiss, first Togekiss we've seen so far, just synergizes so well, such good utility as well. I was going for Palisand Acelgor, but the Acelgor got sniped, so Palisand doesn't synergize as well as I had hoped. I could still proc it with like Surf on Weavile or something. Not optimal, but it is still around. And then we have a Trick Room option with Porygon and Vikavolt, although it's only 2, and Palisand 3. So a Trick Room option here, and then we have a Rain option here, Beat Up option, so quite good synergies. Flexibility is there. If I don't want to use Rain, I could definitely use our Beat Up here. Intimidate on Luxray will help out a bit, and then Trick Room option, so pretty flexible. Utility is getting kind of nutty in these last few teams. We have Politoed is just an amazing utility mon with Helping Wind, Icy Wind it gets. It has Drizzle, so that's good for utility. Togekiss has Follow Me, Helping Hand as well, and Yawn. And Politoed has Perish Song. I don't have any trappers, but the utility's there. And then Porygon 2 has the Trick Room option as well as Ally Switch. And I believe Luxray gets Snarl. Yeah, Luxray does get Snarl, so there's quite a good utility options going around here. As well as like Beat Up on Weavile and the Weather Control. Typing's not amazing. There's a pretty big fairy weakness here. This guy and this guy and these guys are all weak to fairy, and I don't have any resists. I do have some good redirection support for that, but if something comes with Dazzling Gleam, redirection won't help you with the spread moves. There's also no grass type, so despite these 3 water types, or no fire types, there's no water, fire, grass core. I do have a fairy and dragon, so steel, dragon, fairy, steel, kind of there. But again, the lack of grass and fire types and the fairy weakness does hurt the typing quite a bit. Offensive, it's a pretty offensive team. We have Justified Cobalion that can put in some work. We have Vikavolt with a crazy 145 special attack, Urshifu 130 attack, Palisand with the potential of weakness policy proc, and 100 special attack, and then Togekiss, Crit Togekiss, is just, there's quite a bit of offense on this team, and it gets boosted with the speed support from Kingdra's offense will get boosted for this. Just a lot of all-around offense, Trick Room option, offense is pretty good. Defense is pretty good, okay. Again, the only weakness for defensive is the fairy typing. It does have the 3rd overall highest HP, 4th overall highest defense, and 11th overall highest special defense. So it's pretty bulky. The only main weakness really is those fairy types. And then even the rain core here doesn't share weaknesses. Like Kingdra is not weak to grass or electric, which are Politoed's only weaknesses. So the defensive options are pretty good. And you also have mons like Togekiss, Palisand, Cobalion, Porygon 2, which are just so bulky. And then the Intimidate and Snarl support from Luxray could help patch up any holes. Maxing candidates, we have Cobalion, Kingdra, G-Max Urshifu would be kind of be the main 3. And then we also have Palisand as an option if it gets weakness policy, water compaction boosts, and Togekiss potentially as well for some good crits. Matchups, again, very skill dependent, similar to our other team. It's going to be like a weather war, and if I'm a little bit weak to redirection if I'm going for a justified beat up strat or something into Palisand to proc its weakness policy. So a little weaker to redirection. I also don't have any tailwind, so that hurts the matchup a little bit. But the matchups seem quite skill dependent for this team. So overall, great rain core, good options with beat up, good trick room options as well. Just overall power with the rain in Urshifu, and then some good support coming out from these mons here. Next up, we have the DMW, coached by T-Zard at rank 5. So first up, you look at this, it's a pretty clear Sun team. You have Setter, Sweeper, Sweeper. so it's pretty good synergy with that. You also have Shiftry, but if you have Executor, you didn't really need Shiftry, but I suppose it's an option. The Dark might help for some size spam. But then Executor resists it anyways. But anyways, good Sun synergy setup here is pretty strong. And you also have Trick Room option with Gothitelle, Gastrodon, Marowak, and then you can also use Executor or Trick Room if instead you go min speed instead of max. The Executor really kind of pulls the synergy here together because you can run it with the Sun or with the Trick Room. It's a pretty strong option in that sense. Synergy is good, flexibility is good. Again, you can Trick Room or you can Sun. The only reason like flexibility and synergy aren't higher, like 8 or 10, Lucario is really out of place here. Shiftry kind of just doubles up with Executor's role, and Duraludon seems a little out of place with no Tailwind to support it and no real other speed control aside from Trick Room. No way to make this faster to help it out. You do have beat up Shiftry onto Lucario, which helps keep that synergy high. Another option here. Still kind of flexible. But aside from the beat up here, Lucario is very out of place. And it doesn't seem like you're going to be bringing that too much if you have your Trick Room and Sun option. So it does add to the flexibility though. The typing is pretty good overall. You have like Fire, Water, Grass. You have some Fairy, some Steel. It's pretty solid. It's just kind of weak to Rock and Ground. Despite having some good resistances for them, like you're not going to usually bring those together. Like if you're bringing these guys, that's a lot of Fire, Ground weakness. This guy's weak to Ground 2 and Fire. This guy's weak to Fire, this guy's weak to Fire. So you kind of have a lot of doubled up weaknesses on some things that you would bring together. But if you're able to balance them out, the typing can be really good. Offense is high. Zard, Duraludon, these guys all in their respective Trick Room or Sun, and then this would beat up. Offense is quite high. Defense, again, you could kind of just get hefted by like a Rock type if you're bringing these, or a Ground type along with him. So you really just got to watch out for those Rock and Ground. Maxing potential, you have Lucario if beat up, Charizard in the Sun, Egg in the Sun, and Dura kind of anytime. So it's kind of average because they're all very conditional when you're going to max these. Like these two have to be in the Sun. This only works if it's beat up. And this is kind of better if it has speed assistance, which you don't have with the tail. So the utility, back to the utility, is only at 7. No Tailwind. You have Follow Me from Togedic and Helping Hand, which is pretty good. And then the Trick Room, and then Fake Out from Gothitelle. So the utility is decent, and you have some weather settings, but no speed control at all for this guy. Or if you lose your Sun, these guys aren't going to be fast enough. Charizard maybe, but these two are definitely not going to be fast enough to be helping out. So I think Tailwind would have really helped here to work outside of the Sun. It's kind of, for matchups, we put them at pretty good. Like it's good into other weathers because Torkoal's so slow. If you lead it, you'll always be getting your weather. The terrain, you don't have any terrain control, but you're not necessarily weak to it. Like you're not really weak to grassy terrain at all, with all these fire types and flying, running around. Rain maybe, but again you'll get your weather, and then you'll weakening water moves for your fire types, and you have grass types here, so rain is a pretty good matchup as well. It's just kind of weak to Psy Spam. Like the only thing you have to counter Psy Spam is Shiftry, which isn't an amazing mon anyways. So just kind of weak to Psy Spam is the main thing for the matchups here. But overall, solid team. Summary, you got your Sun, you've got your Trick Room, and then you've got a little bit of redirection, and like a beat up strategy is pretty good overall. Next up, we have the New World Order Kingdras, coached by Keith, which is at rank 4, where we see our other Togekiss. So just going down the list here, we have some good utility, 7, Togekiss, Oranguru. That's just some solid utility. You've got like Helping Hand, you've got Follow Me, you've got Trick Room, you've got Yawn. Blastoise, again, as mentioned earlier, does have Fake Out. We'll add on the list here. And then you'll have some other options from Blastoise, another Yawn option. So you do have some good utility as well as terrain control with Indeedee. And you could potentially like trap people in with Sandaconda if needed. And then Wigglytuff has a little bit of utility as well. The defensive team overall, 4 out of 5. Pretty solid. 4th highest HP, 2nd highest special defense. Defense is below average, but you saw some like beefy mons with Goodra, Blastoise. Sandaconda is pretty tanky. And then Wigglytuff, kind of low defenses, high HP. And then Conkeldurr with like Assault Vest is quite strong as well. And then Togekiss, of course. Good Dynamaxes I've noticed as well. You've got Conkeldurr, you've got Togekiss, you've got Hustle Durant, we've got Goodra, are all very good Dynamax Mons. You have Psyspam with these two, which the team doesn't look like it's built around, but definitely has in it to like supplement everything, so that's pretty good. Good synergies, of course. Of course, the Psyspam here. You have the Blastoise Togekiss is a not bad synergy, and you have like Follow Me Durant from Togekiss to protect that, keep the Durant alive, just kill everything with Hustle. It's pretty good. You also have Wigglytuff, which has competitive. This is like a perfect Dragapult counter because it's immune to both of its stabs, and then if it uses either of its moves on your ally, then Wigglytuff gets a big special attack boost. Because Dragapult stab Dragon will lower attack, and Ghost lowers another stat. It lowers a stat though, so it'll give the competitive boost to Wigglytuff here. So the synergies are kind of good. The synergies are good, but they don't really fit with each other. So that's why it's only at a 7 here. But it is good. Utility, already mentioned, is good. Typing is good. No standout weaknesses for typings here. Offense again, Psyspam strong, Togekiss strong, Conkeldurr strong. Under Trick Room as well, you have the Trick Room option with Oranguru here. And maybe Wigglytuff as well. Yeah, and then Goodra is just another good offensive mon. You have Trick Room, but in the Trick Room, you kind of only have Conkeldurr as your offensive option. So it is an option though. You have Sandaconda, which is good for trapping, but you have no Perish Song on anything, which is unfortunate. That could have been something sneaky. There's no weather control aside from Sandaconda getting hit, which is very reliant on the enemy. There's not a whole lot you could do about it. I guess you could hit it yourself, but that's just kind of a worse option for setting any weather. And even if you do get the sand up, there's nothing here that benefits from the sand at all. You could potentially hinder other weathers, but then you're forcing yourself to run Sandaconda, which I think is one of the weaker mons on the team as well. So weather might be a bit of an issue if they can outspeed and take you out before you get Trick Room, but if you can get Trick Room up against weather, Conkeldurr might be able to put in some work. Another poor thing against this team is there's no speed control, aside from the TR here. Like there's no Tailwind, there's no Thunder Wave. You're just gonna have to kind of brute force your way through these speed matchups that are losing in weather or against other Tailwind. With overall 8 speed, you're about average speed. So yeah, summary. You've got your Psyspam, we've got Trick Room, we've got Follow Me, Hustle, we've got a good counter to like Intimidate. Oh, that's Fake Out. You've got a good counter to Intimidate or other maxings with Togekiss, and then you can like Blastoise and Goodra, just kind of good overall. Next up, we have the Teenage Mutant Ninja Squirtles, which is an amazing team name. Coached by Pierre, we have on ranked 3rd. So you've got some, we'll just go over the utility first. It's at 7, it's pretty solid. You have some really good utility with Whimsicott. Or we'll put it at 8, I think. Oh, it was supposed to be 8, because this was 42, I was looking at it. With Follow Me, Clefairy, you have Whimsicott, which just does almost everything. It's got like Tailwind, Switcheroo, Helping Hand, Fake Tears, Taunt, Encore. And then you have Scrafty with Fake Out Intimidate, you have Rotom, Thunderwave Will-O-Wisp, and then possibly Max Airstream because of the Rotom fan. So the utility is very strong on this team. The synergy is pretty decent. It kind of looks like you can help out with the Duraludon Whimsicott here. You have Colossal, you don't have a whole lot to proc. You could Aqua Jet actually Inteleon into Colossal, which will get you the Weakness Policy and the Speed Boost. So there's some decent synergies, not amazing, but they're pretty decent. And it's very versatile, like you're not really locking yourself into big cores of mons like weather teams are. And you just have some strong offense all around as well. So it's quite versatile of what you want to bring. Like do you want to bring, and then you have like for utility you have Defiant, which will help shut down max moves and Intimidate. Especially you could pair this with Cinderace is a good synergy because then they won't be able to intimidate you with the Defiant here. Typing kind of average overall. No like huge weaknesses. Kind of weak to ground. Like weak to ground, weak to ground, weak to ground, weak to ground. But Liberace changes his ability so often. You can't hold the ground too much against you here. A little bit weak to fighting with these guys. So a little bit of fighting weakness as well. So the typing isn't more than 3. Again, offense, easy 5 out of 5. Like you have potential Aqua Jet into max weakness policy Colossal. You have potentially Defiant boosted Bisharp. You have like a Tailwinded Cinderace, Inteleon, and Duraludon will all put in some work. And then the Rotom Fan potentially could dish out some decent damage. So offense is quite strong here. Defense is average, kind of with the typing. It's almost lowest HP, but almost highest defense. So it kind of balances out. And the special defense is slightly below average. Good maxing potential. We have stuff like Cinderace, Duraludon, especially with a Whimsicott Tailwind. You have the Colossal. Inteleon's G-Max. I don't know if it's going to be your optimal max, especially when you have these two, but it's possible. Rotom and Scrafty are kind of underrated Maxmons, but they're very situational, but they can be very strong if in that situation. Matchups, again, going to be very skill matchup here. Not really weak to Follow Me, because except for the Aqua Jet into Colossal, but you have so many other options, so you're not really weak to Follow Me. It might struggle a little bit against Trick Room because you're so fast with 4th highest speed, and especially if you're Trick Rooming, or not Trick Rooming, if you're Tailwinding, your Mons are already quite fast that want to benefit from the Trick Room, or from the Tailwind. So if somebody gets a Trick Room off on you, that might be a little bit of a harder time, especially since Liberace will go last and won't have a type advantage in Trick Room. There's no weather, terrain, hurts utility a little bit. Again, you're not super weak to it, especially with your Tailwind support, but you don't have any control over it really. You'll just have to beat it. And Excadrill kind of goes to town on this team as well, as mentioned with the ground. Excadrill could potentially just come in with a Sandstream and go to town. But there's not a whole lot of Excadrills, and you do have Scrafty to help counter the Excadrill. So the matchups are kind of average still. Quite skill dependent for the matchups on this one. Next up we have the Washington Walreins, led by Piranha Plant. Ranked 2nd. As you can see off the hop, it's 9 out of 9, 9 out of 10 synergy, 9 out of 10 flexibility. So we have a Tailwind, 2 priority Tailwinds, with things to benefit from it like Gengar, Silvally, Bisharp, and Terrakion will all benefit from that a lot. You also have the beat up into Terrakion is quite strong. You also have a G-Max Lapras, which could potentially benefit from a weakness policy. And then you have a self-proc, maybe like a Discharge or something from Vikavolt. That would kind of hurt it, but well, you'll have something to proc this for sure. And then you have the Tailwind priorities with Dracovish. Like the synergy is just pretty strong here. You have a lot of options, so it kind of keeps it flexible with high synergy and high flexibility because they're very interchangeable. And you also have a TR option with these two guys. So both slow. Vikavolt hits very hard. That's kind of the only Trick Room here, but it is an option, which gives it more flexibility. The Defiant again is good, helps counter Intimidate when you have something like Dracovish, Terrakion that don't want to be intimidated, and Silvally, if you go physical, won't want to be intimidated. So the Bisharp really helps deal with those. Maxes, we gave a 3. You have like Lapras, Terrakion, like maybe Runerigus if you proc weakness policy on it, but kind of just these 2 for max. They are pretty strong though. Maybe Silvally. So maxing is kind of average. And then free utility is like Whimsicott provides so much utility, and so do these 2 for Tailwind. And then you have Trick Room here. Don't have any redirection, which is big. No weather control, no terrain control. So no redirection. You're not really weak to redirection, except for the beat up here. But then again, you could just like Tailwind off the hop with these 2, or Tailwind this. There's so many options. It's just so flexible and such good synergies here. Offense, off the hop, there's not a whole lot of offense. Like it's like Gengar kind of by itself is your main offensive option. Maybe Terrakion, but most of your offense needs the Tailwind support, or the beat up, or the weakness policy. Typing, pretty good overall. You have like fire, water, grass. Well, this isn't a huge grass type, but you do have it there. You have dragon, steel fairy. Again, not the optimal options, but you do have some good typing cores. And there's no standout weaknesses either. Quite the strong team. So just the offense is a little hard on it, but I think the synergy and the flexibility really carry this team with its options here. And the last team we're going to go over is the Davidson Incineroars, coached by Visaper, which we have at rank 1 here. So to start off, utility and flexibility are both at 9 out of 10. Flexibility, we have Tailwind, Trick Room, Yawn, Fake Out, Intimidate, Helping Hand, Follow Me. So we have our Follow Me in DD here. We have even like Icy Wind with Melodic. We have our Trick Room option with Chandelure. Although not a ton to benefit from the Trick Room. It is there to maybe reverse enemy Trick Room. Or like Trick Room in Prison could be nice on Chandelure. Yawn as well. Fake Out from Lipard. I believe Crocodile gets Fake Out. Okay, Crocodile does not get Fake Out. Crocodile does not get Fake Out, I checked. But Lipard does. And then you have Intimidate from our Crocodile here. This team might be a little weak to Intimidate with Cinderace, Crocodile wanting to use that a lot, but you have and Urshifu, but you have Corviknight here to help block, to just reflect the Intimidate, which could be quite handy. So synergies are pretty good, 8 out of 10, quite solid. You have like enough speed, second highest overall, and you have speed control with Tailwind 2 on Corviknight, which can boost up your faster / medium speed mons. Like these guys will all benefit from Tailwind quite a bit. I also highlight the mon. Will benefit from Tailwind quite a bit, and just be able to kind of go to town. You also have Icy Wind, slow them down with Melodic. Cinderace and Indeedee and Melodic are just so good, and they synergize with so much in general. They just put in so much work and kind of glue everything together. You do have options for almost all leads, like you can imprison Trick Room here to stop other Trick Room. You can Tailwind with Corviknight, you can Intimidate or Fake Out with one of these guys, and then you can just like go straight into Psy Spam with just Indeedee, and then you like Follow Me or Helping Hand to support the Cinderace, which the Cinderace can just go to town after that. And then Cinderace and like Melodic are just such menaces. It helps your defense, which is alright, but the Melodic's helping that for sure. And then your offense is kind of nutty with just Cinderace alone, really. Chandelure helps a little, and these guys, you just have some pretty good overall offense. The only reason utility is not 10 is there's no weather control. If you had any weather control that you would benefit from, that would probably bump you up to 10, but the utility is just pretty good with all these guys here. Quite the utility. Like Tailwind, Yawn, Imprison Trick Room, Fake Out, Intimidate, Icy Wind, Helping Hand, Follow Me, and then like Thunder Wave or something. So that's pretty good. Typing is pretty good. No huge weaknesses. A little weak to ground with Chandelure, Liberace, and Boltund. But again, Liberace, so fast you can change its type. That's not a huge deal there. Most ones are kind of frail. So again, the defense is kind of boosted up by a couple of these guys, and then kind of brought down by a couple other ones. So HP is high, almost lowest defense though. So a couple frail, easy OHKOs on some of these guys. Even Urshifu can go down if fully invested in attack and speed to like a Grassy Glide. Speaking of Grassy Glide, it looks like Rillaboom might be a little bit of a threat to this team. Like it can do some really hefty damage to, like with Grassy Glide, to these three here. It can knock off Chandelure. It has fighting moves for these two as well. It has knockoff for Indeedee. So Rillaboom might be a little hard, but overall I think the power you have as well will be able to take that out. Especially if Cinderace can go first and get a good fire move off. Yeah, so overall 45 out of 55. Again, really good support options, quite flexible. Like you could run any variety of things here. Synergy's not as good as some of the other teams. but it's still very good, and I think the flexibility really makes up for the synergy not being 100% perfect. But yeah, again, really strong team overall. Number 1. Fancy. Alrighty, well thanks for watching, everybody. Let me know what you think. Just a bit of a recap. We do have the ranking here. So a lot of these teams at the end, once we hit like Milwaukee Miltanks, we go from 38, 39, 39, 39, 40, 40, 41, 41, 42. So a lot of these teams are really close in power from 10th to 6th are all quite similar in power. So if you're in that zone, you guys are pretty even playing field here. Even up with these 241s, it's not a huge gap. And then even the top team is only 2 points ahead of the second top team. So it's not a huge gap for these top teams. They're all quite good. A few of the lower teams have some possible strategies, but really just got to get around some of the main flaws that there are. And I will show the average statistics for anyone who wants. This is just the raw data. And these are sorted for highest HP, highest attack, highest defense, highest special attack, highest special defense, highest speed, and total for anyone who wants to take a look. Alright, thanks guys, and let's get into the battling.